good evening or good day to everyone. This is Bogi from ICRSE and welcome to our meeting, Sex Workers in the Frontline. This is the launch of our latest publication on the impact of COVID-19 on sex workers in Europe and Central Asia. And you also can find the whole publication on ICRSE's website, which is www.sexworkeurope.org. If I'm not mistaken. I will also put it in the chat in the Zoom meeting. So we have some guests with us in the Zoom meeting, and we are also streaming this discussion on Facebook. So if you have any questions to our presenters about the report, then feel free to interact on social media as well. We will have hopefully 5 speakers with us today who are giving us country case studies on how they are doing as sex worker rights organizations during the third, somewhere in the fourth wave of the pandemic. You might remember that ICRSE has been doing quite some work around monitoring the impact of COVID-19 on sex worker communities. And I think the last discussion we had was in last December on the International Day to End Violence Against Sex Workers around COVID. So almost 3 months have passed ever since, and there is quite some developments in different countries. This is what we will be hearing about today. I'm not sure if we can show who we have here with us, because it's also a Zoom meeting, but we have Dr. Anastacia with us today from Umbrella Lane, Scotland. We have Ratecka, SexWorkPolska from Poland. We have ICRSE co-convener Sabrina Sanchez from OTRAS, Spain, and we have Thor Colonna from UTSOPI, Belgium. So this is going to be the discussants for today's session. I would like to ask you, if you can, I put the link in the chat here to share the discussion on Facebook and social media, if you can. And just the regular Zoom rules are also applicable for this event. So please mute yourself. Please introduce yourself when you're asking a question. You can turn on your video for that, or you can just do it anonymously in the chat box, sending a question to me. And no transphobia, homophobia, no racist remarks. If they occur, then we as moderators will be taking care of them. So it's my pleasure to be here in one way. And of course, it's not the most comforting topic for discussion, as we see that countries are harder and harder hit by COVID-19, and sex worker communities are harder and harder hit as well. But I think it is a very important discussion to have, and we cannot really forget about sex workers in the different COVID-19 responses. So I promise not to talk so much. Like, this is the promise I've been trying to keep up in the past couple of months, as I spend most of my time online and I work alone at home. You know, I just kind of like push everything out when I have the chance. So I won't take up much space, but I would like to just summarize the COVID-19 report for you. So I prepared a short presentation. This is also something that I'm not really doing. So this is a first for me. I like to speak to people and to computers these days. But Latsi, can I ask you to start my presentation, please? So you find, I hope you see it already. You find the whole publication online in English so far, but hopefully there's going to be translations as well. If you want to see my presentation here in the Zoom, then you can pin that little live stream picture. So there is a function there which you can use. Okay, so Latik, the next slide, please. This is our design of our cover, the cover of the publication. So how did we come up with this report? You can see that we have been doing quite a lot regarding COVID-19 developments with our member organizations. So from very early on, ICRSE started monitoring the developments around COVID-19 with its member organizations. We had a dedicated website. I will put that in the chat box as well, in case you don't know. And not only did we try to write up and document what different organizations are telling us from the ground, but we also organized various online meetings on different subjects, such as crowdfunding, which a lot of sex worker rights groups did, also on mental health advocacy during in times of COVID. And lastly, last November, December, we carried out a survey with more than 20 organizations as well. You see this little image here. We asked the question in the survey, what are the groups who are especially impacted by COVID-19 in your environment, in your context? And you can see this is not a very functional map in a sense, or image in a sense, that these are, of course, overlapping categories of different subgroups within sex worker communities, that migrant women, street-based sex workers, trans sex workers, women of color, asylum seekers, single mothers, these were all groups who suffered a lot during 2020 and continue to face hardships in 2021 as well. So the next slide, please. I will just like a little bit take some time to summarize the impact of COVID-19. We have been in this for more than a year now, and I think it's good to take a look back, like what were the learnings and what different sex worker groups reported to us in this past 1 year. So I think I can say that most of the sex worker groups who participated in the survey and we talked to emphasize the socioeconomic impact of COVID-19. It's kind of a cliche to say now, but the crisis revealed in weeks last year that sex workers are amongst the population most disproportionately impacted due to their social and economic exclusion, working in a highly criminalized sector, and often being migrants, undocumented migrants as well. All organizations who participated in the ICRSE survey signaled that there was a surge of contacts to their collectives as sex workers have found themselves in an unprecedented situation with an often complete lack of income. For instance, the English Collective of Prostitutes reported that between March and the end of September 2020, the number of women contacting them rose approximately 30%. Also, a Cardiff-based NGO charity from the UK saw a 70% rise in women coming to them for support during the coronavirus crisis last year. So I think these numbers are pretty much telling about the surge of contacts sex worker collectives had to respond to and attend to their needs. And let's talk a little bit about how this all started. So sex workers began to report a huge decline in the number of clients from February onwards in Southern European countries such as Spain and Italy. And we are going to have with us Sabrina from Spain, who can also tell a little bit more about that. And the economic impact of the first lockdowns fell on a sex working community, which was already precarious and engaged in an unrecognized sector. So in Italy, sex work is not recognized as work, for example. Therefore, it's not even possible to work as a self-employed, while in Spain, sex workers are heavily criminalized. For instance, soliciting on the street is prohibited in various cities, in Malaga, Sevilla, Madrid, Bilbao, Murcia, Valencia, and sex workers are frequently punished by fines. So not only did they have to face the rapid decline in the number of clients, but in legalized environments, in legalized countries where sex work is in a way legal under certain circumstances, there were bans introduced on close contact professions. And I think it's quite a paradox situation that sex workers were amongst the first professions which were banned, But when it came to any kind of social support from governments, they were in most cases not considered eligible for that. So what we have to observe here is a huge loss of income for sex workers. There is a number from the beginning of the pandemic from Spain. After the introduction of the national lockdown, sex workers reported a 32% drop in the number of advertisers on online advertising platforms. And lastly, about the access to government support, this was in most of the cases, in most of the countries, sex worker rights groups reported that there is almost no access to governmental support. And I just want to give you a quick example of the UK, what were the common problems reported. The English Collective of Prostitutes is coming out with a report now about this. So what sex workers were facing is that they didn't get any money. The universal credit agencies who were in charge of assessments of rents, which was they based the average housing allowance for the area, but which in reality did not cover the actual cost of the rent. A lot of sex workers could not prove their identity and had issues with their identity documents. They were simply turned down for arbitrary reasons. And a lot of sex workers also had difficulties navigating the online system, or they simply had no money for mobile data to access the government system, or they didn't have Wi-Fi in their accommodation. And I think this was very much common across all the different countries of the region, and our speakers will also share some insights around that. Even in countries where sex work is legal, migrant sex workers were left out of any kind of government scheme, support schemes. For instance, in Germany, the compulsory registration that is required from sex workers, that prevented a lot of undocumented migrant sex workers from accessing support. And of course, all this brought along housing insecurity, increasing housing insecurity. So, for instance, in Spain, it had been common for sex workers to stay at their workplaces, and with brothels shut down and lack of rental contracts, many sex workers found themselves on the streets. In France, sex workers in migrant dorm-like accommodations faced pressure from their landlords as well. There was another trend that was reported, that some sex workers spent the quarantine with their clients at their homes for a reduced price or for free in the absence of any other accommodation options. And they often ended up in potentially exploitative situations as well. Wow, I said a lot in a short amount of time, but let's jump to the next slide, which is about the impact of COVID-19 on health. I won't go much into detail because ICRSE and SWAN, the Sex Workers' Rights Advocacy Network, did an assessment of the health situation of sex workers last year. So you can also find this on the ICRSE website. But what needs to be emphasized here is that the sex worker community has a prevalence of underlying physical and mental health conditions due to stigma, marginalization, and criminalization, which also increases their risk at contracting COVID-19. And this was actually acknowledged by a couple of health intergovernmental health organizations, such as the ECDC, the European Center for Disease Control, but this hardly manifested into any health-oriented, health-focused actions. So there were kind of like no health support provided for the community. Another key aspect is that transition-related and sexual and reproductive health care have not been prioritized as vital. Thus, sex workers had to face barriers to getting their medication or treatments. And the limited capacities of HIV clinics and outreach services also had a disproportionate impact on sex workers' access to AIDS, HIV, not testing necessarily, because testing was in some countries still continued, but a lot of clinics did not take on new patients. They did not start treatment. So this was also impacting sex workers. And finally, which was quite common and mentioned by a lot of organizations, information about the COVID-19 developments and protection guidelines was not really available in migrant communities' languages. So a lot of sex worker organizations actually spent quite some time translating the official guidelines to their communities. And the next one, which is the impact of COVID-19 on sex workers' safety. So I think we have been hearing from feminist and women's rights groups a lot about the increase in partnership violence and gender-based violence affecting women, mainly cis women, at least in their rhetoric. However, there was not really any mention of sex workers as a group who is exposed to violence due to various factors that we'll be talking about today. And I think what is important to emphasize again, and was echoed by sex worker organizations as well, that economic emergencies impacting the community resulted in heightened risk of taking on abusive clients or engaging in risky behaviors. So this was observed by a lot of sex worker groups in Europe. About policing, I think that's one of the most complex and most important question under safety. A lot of countries reported that restrictions, COVID-19 restrictions and lockdown laws have been imposed in discriminatory ways in a lot of cases, especially targeting sex workers, a lot of sex workers of color, migrant sex workers in many countries. And for instance, from the UK, there were reports of sex workers receiving on-the-spot fines, sex workers being harassed for working on the street or experiencing their premises raided. These police raids and increased surveillance were reported from Italy, from Poland, from France, from Germany, from the UK. So in almost all countries, there was an increased police presence, and not in a good way. One sex worker activist who I was talking to last year actually summarized it in the following way. Those who are undocumented migrant sex workers even fear going out. There is a lot of police control during the lockdown. If they are stopped by the police, they will be probably deported. So I think this reflects on the situation quite well. Undocumented migrant sex workers, again, were those the most affected by the increased police presence. And I'm not sure if we will have a speaker from Norway, because we are still waiting for her, but there is quite a case of increased policing from Norway. So in Norway, the police actually used pandemic regulations, so the regulations about the prevention of COVID-19, to unfairly arrest, detain, and heavily fine and deport foreign sex workers. And also from Norway, I think, and I would be curious to hear about other countries as well, what's the experience. Sex workers also provided accounts of an increase in intoxicated clients who refuse to pay or ask for non-payment because they could refer to the fact that selling sex was prohibited. So they took advantage of that. Also clients who refuse to use a condom, who are bargaining over the price or demand services that the sex worker does not offer. So I'm curious to hear about you how these interactions and how the bargaining power of sex workers was impacted by COVID-19. And how did sex worker rights groups respond? So the next slide, you will see a map of all the all the money raised, all the help provided to the communities. If you pin it in the Zoom meeting, you can see it like in a bigger version. So Astrid is here. I got the news that we will have someone. Hi, Astrid. We will have someone from Norway to speak about the violence. Cool. So this is what kind of like a collection of how many people were reached. So we did a kind of like a collection to show actually how resilient sex worker communities and their organizations were. So I just like put the basic recommendations on the next slide. And I think you have been hearing this all for so long. So it's not us who have to hear this, but our decision makers. So this is what ICRSE have been advocating for. We are trying to advocate for the inclusion of sex workers in European Commission policies. We are managing some inclusion here and there, but maybe we can talk about that a little bit at the questions and answer session. So nothing new under the sun, if that's the saying in English. It definitely is in Hungarian. So full decriminalization of sex work, more money for community-led organizations that are run by sex workers to distribute emergency relief, social assistance to cover unpaid, low-paid caregivers, informal workforce, including sex workers, moratorium on evictions, which is still not working in a lot of countries, emergency housing options, police enforcement and of the confinement and the isolation should not single out people and not use identity and not be used as identity and residence status checks. And I think one of the most important is that raids, arrests, prosecutions, and deportation must be immediately suspended if they haven't been so far. We keep hearing about raids and arrests, so I think it's not the case yet. So that was it. Sorry for the intruder, but we managed it efficiently. And yeah, so this is what is the publication about. So now you managed to get a glimpse of it if you won't have time to read it fully. But the publication also lists quite powerful advocacy and community actions from other sex worker rights groups, not just the ones that are here, but also beyond. So if you are looking for inspiration, what you would like to do with your community, you can learn from these experiences from the publication, which in a second I will put in the chat. So let's not hear from me anymore. Let's hear from the ground. So the first speaker will be Anastacia Ryan from Scotland, Umbrella Lane, and there has been a lot of news coming from Scotland. So the government did not necessarily take the best course of action of supporting and including sex workers. So how was it? How you did intense campaigning, Anastacia? So I'm looking forward to hearing about your experience and how is the government consultation now. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Bogie. Yeah, and also just to repeat what's said in the chat group, you handled that so well. Thank you and well done. Okay, so Umbrella Lane, we're based in Scotland. We're a sex worker-led project based in Glasgow, not the capital, but working with sex workers throughout Scotland. Our kind of key focuses of work, firstly are on community. So we aim to provide holistic support and services to sex workers of all genders. Our second one is around connection. So we really try to transgress binaries around politics and work in partnerships with other services to make sure that sex workers can access inclusive, non-judgmental and stigma-free services across health, safety and access to justice. And we also try and incite conversation in Scotland. So we do that by utilising the media, humanising sex workers within the media particularly, as a way to try and reduce stigma. So when COVID hit in 2020, last kind of February, and the initial guidelines came in around social distancing, like sex workers all over Europe and all over the world, sex workers had to immediately try and stop working. But what we even seen back at this point is that sex workers who could stop working were those who were already registered as self-employed. So here in Scotland, you can register as self-employed as a worker. Many people don't, due to fear of stigma or of criminalisation or intervention into their lives, particularly migrant workers, but also workers who are parents. So we saw that those who were registered as self-employed were able to access government grants, but many of the workers weren't able to register for any sort of safety net apart from the basic universal credit that you were talking about there, Bogie. It's such a minimum amount. There's a lot of paperwork and barriers to accessing it in the beginning, but also there's a lot of sanctions that if you don't kind of meet regular requirements around accessing that as well. So we saw that the kind of impact of COVID really hit hardest on migrant sex workers here, those without any recourse to public funds, trans and non-binary workers, and also onto street workers as well. Particularly workers within secure accommodation, or those workers who had already left home due to selling sex, had managed to leave home in potentially toxic environments at home, having to return home and be trapped in those homes throughout COVID. So it really did hit those sex workers who were already in a precarious position. So Umbrella Lane very quickly tried to adapt to the situation across all three of our areas that we work on. But I think the main thing that we did at that point that was of use to sex workers was develop a crisis fund. So over the course of 3 months of fundraising, we managed to raise £27,112 and give out over 170 payments to sex workers throughout each month of the first lockdown. The feedback that we got back from that were things like that it had been a lifeline to people who weren't able to access other sources of income or support. So I think for Umbrella Lane, not only was it a lifeline to sex workers, but it also brought many more people within our network. And we tried to leverage that by bringing people into our sex worker only online spaces and ensure that sex workers had access to one another for peer support as well. So that was the kind of the first one was really the financial crisis that happened with COVID that is still ongoing today. The second part really was around the isolation and just general lack of support for sex workers. Our sexual health clinics pretty much closed down throughout the first lockdown, and they're still quite difficult to access now, although you can get an appointment, but to do that you have to disclose that you're in a vulnerable group. So many sex workers who again are migrants or parents will not disclose. So many people have gone for almost a year and a half without any access to things like sexual and reproductive health services. The third one really around isolation was that many sex workers did not have access to a smartphone or couldn't access Umbrella Lane services from their personal phone, and they were just using a non-smartphone for their work. So we also did a drive to try and get donated smartphones to Umbrella Lane and distributed them to sex workers in need as well, to make sure that people felt connected within our peer support spaces online as well. We also held workshops to try and support sex workers to either move their business online or diversify their income, but also some of them just as a way to bring community together, have a bit of a laugh as well, have a bit of fun. We invited Jack the Stripper, for example, to do a life drawing class for our community, which I think something like 140 people from all over the world attended. So just these kind of general workshops that some practical, but some also just around supporting and giving sex workers a way to connect throughout the pandemic. The third way that sex workers were really hit badly, and I think like many people throughout COVID, but many people who were in really precarious situations, was emotionally and in terms of mental health support. So Umbrella Lane worked with a national organisation here called Wellbeing Scotland, who does counselling and therapeutic work. And we managed to develop a partnership that meant that we could refer sex workers in for fast-tracked access to free counselling by Wellbeing Scotland. We also had sex workers within our network train the counsellors to ensure that they were being non-judgmental, inclusive, and using supportive and non-stigmatising language. So that's something that we're continuing now. Obviously, although coronavirus has, and we are seeming to be doing well with the vaccine, and we are looking at a kind of route out of lockdown now, for sex workers under the public health legislation that came in around COVID, that is still used to target sex workers. So sex workers are still reluctant to go back to work if they can avoid doing so. But as has happened throughout the pandemic, those who couldn't avoid to continue to work are continuing to work at the moment. And we're definitely seeing an increase in people going out to work. We started another crisis fund in 2021, and we've so far distributed 81 payments from that. We do see that the demand is still high for financial support from sex workers. That's not going to go away anytime soon. And everything that you mentioned there, Bogie, around, a reduction in clients now pushing boundaries, a reduction in options to take clients. So taking clients who were already known to be potentially dangerous or violent or push boundaries, sex workers were having to see them to secure an income. So that's still all ongoing. For us in Scotland, I think the most frustrating thing as a small project in a small community was, in the very beginning of the pandemic, the groups who have always advocated for the Nordic model to criminalise clients said publicly that coronavirus was in fact an opportunity to exit women from prostitution and to bring forward legislation that would put that into place, so bring forward the criminalisation of the purchase of sex. Seeing coronavirus as an opportunity when what we were dealing with on the front line as a real disaster of hardship and severe emotional and financial stress to sex workers, for us was quite frustrating to hear. But then, of course, a month later, in the middle of the pandemic, Ash Denham, our Community Safety Minister, launched a consultation based on our current prostitution policy that was very clearly in favour of a move towards the criminalisation of the purchase of sex. So whilst a small under-resourced organisation, we were dealing with frontline support, we then had to galvanise a community to ensure that people with lived experience of doing sex work were heard and centred in the public consultation around this new model of legislation. So we worked with ScotPEP, which is a national organisation here, campaigning and advocacy sex worker-led group. Both of our organisations really heightened our efforts around advocacy and campaigns. We took part in televised debates. We made sure that we were in the media pretty much every week. And we supported sex workers through running sex worker-led workshops to write their own consultation responses as well. I really think that the people who have brought forward that consultation didn't think that we would be able to galvanise such a movement against the push to criminalise clients. I think they might have actually been quite shocked. But I think for us, knowing the impact of the coronavirus was the reduction in clients, a higher risk of violence, more policing, and a lack of support for sex workers, we were already seeing exactly what the impact would be on sex workers if you criminalise clients. So for us to then kind of see that this was being pushed in legislation really made us have to heighten our efforts and our energy against this move. So the consultation is now closed, and our Parliament has just stopped its recent session. So we are waiting for a general election, and then we'll probably hear which MSP, whether it's the same one who gets elected, will take that forward. At the time, the people who were leading on the consultation were trying to say that it wasn't about a move towards criminalisation of clients. They were saying that it was just a general consultation on how to reduce demand and support women to exit. It was all focused on cis women. I think for us, we were very disbelieving of that, and we knew that the people behind it and the people who were campaigning for this were in fact in support of the Nordic model. So it exists and remains a threat. It's one that ScotPEP and Umbrella Lane are still trying to monitor the situation, do some advocacy around. But for us, one of the most difficult things as a sex worker-led group is that we are rendered ineligible for government funding. Because in Scotland, because prostitution is seen as commercial sexual exploitation, you need to sign up to that definition in order to apply for government funds. So because, of course, we sign up to the definition that sex work is work, and we are unable to get government funding. So we are struggling to maintain our organisation with such small resources and high demand of sex workers in crisis throughout the pandemic. But on top of that, to do advocacy and campaigns around this move towards the Nordic model is extremely difficult without being eligible for government funding. So it's almost like we've been removed from that policy and service planning space because we don't support the definition. And in removing us from doing that, it means that we don't have a voice in those spaces as a sex worker-led group, which has given them what they always wanted to see coronavirus as, a political opportunity to introduce legislation to criminalise clients. So I think I'll leave it there. Not a huge amount has changed since 2020, according to your question, in terms of the needs of sex workers through coronavirus. But what has changed is this heightened political effort to bring forward legislation to criminalise clients. And it's one that we now need to adapt in our advocacy and campaigns towards.
Thank you, Anastacia. And let's move to a country then, or a region where client criminalization is pretty much achieved and high on the agenda. So we will hear from Norway, and I'm not sure if this got to you, Astrid, but I wanted you to focus on policing of sex workers during COVID-19 last year and this year, and also violence in general. So we will have Astrid from PION, sex worker interest organization from Norway, and also the owner of the most beautiful background image with us. So,
thank you. Thank you. I have to confess that I'm stepping in for Andres because he reported that he was ill today. So I'm not very prepared for this, but I do my best to say something about the situation in Norway. And I think the most of the thing you have been said, both from the report and also from Scotland and so on, we can just sign and agree about. It's the same situation in Norway. And I think in Norway there has been in the beginning of the COVID, of the pandemic, when there was they introduced the ban of selling sex. We got report or information from sex worker being that increased violence against sex worker, and also like you said that they have to compromise their standard of selling, of working with lower the price, selling without protection, negotiation with the clients about what services they would want to sell, or they sell, or services it was not usually comfortable to sell, and so on. But later we haven't heard so much about violence, and this is not that the violence is not happening. But what we have heard after the ban was lifted was that more about sex workers being stalked by clients and threatening about being outed for in the public, in the family, and such a thing. But the thing is that we are not working very directly to sex worker working in the street, for example. As a pro center, we have the social providers doing this kind of work. So this doesn't mean that this is not happening anymore, but we are not well informed about this thing. But what we know very much about is that the policing, that there has been increased policing, and the policing has been targeting migrant sex worker. And we have migrant sex workers who are living in Norway, and then you have migrant sex workers who are kind of just crossing borders and working, traveling around in Europe and coming to Norway and work and leaving after their visas out and so. And then you have non-document migrants who stay in Norway but don't have any rights. And the police has been targeting all the foreign migrants, people who are not living in Norway, and irregular migrants. And from our point of view, it's not our only our point of view. Also, lawyers and everybody is kind of shocking to see that the sex worker has been facing arbitrary treatment from the police. And it's mostly the immigrant section of the police who was targeting sex worker, and they used both the Immigration Act and also the regulation pandemic, or the COVID-19 regulation, as an argument to expel or deport sex worker. And deportation is really bad because a lot of sex workers who come to Norway are migrants staying in other EU member country, and if they are deported, they are mostly sent back to the national country where they come from. So we have like people living in one EU country who sent back to Brazil, and which makes a really bad problem for people. So, or for sex workers, and we have been working really hard to help people to get access to lawyers to stop the deportation. Mostly we cannot stop being expelled from Norway, but this is not without they have to leave the country and they can come back when they want, and this is not affecting their staying in the Schengen countries, and so as deportation are doing. So what we try to do is to change to stop the deportation. And or that they have lawyers to stop the deportation, so they're not deported; they are just sent out of the country. And this has been we don't have the number how many people have been expelled or deported from Norway, but this has been a lot, I think. we are trying to figure out the number of sex workers who have experienced this thing. And the good thing is that I think a lot of sex workers know about PION. So when they are arrested by the police and so on, they are calling PION to get help to lawyers. And we also inform people saying that if you get arrested by the police, then you just say that you have a lawyer, say that this name and this name and this name, and you are the right to choose your own lawyer. So just give the name of the lawyer, because some of the lawyers from the police is kind of, if you don't have a lawyer, the police put a lawyer for you or make a lawyer. And I think it's not that they are really bad, but they just do what they have to do. So they're not interested in trying to help sex worker in arrest. And but the other lawyers is more looking for that they have translating, that they understand the documents, what they are signing, and that they have translators who help them to translate the language and so on. It's a bit messy what I'm saying now, but I try to. And one of the things is that we know that because everything is going so quick, so when they get arrested, the police call the sex workers and pretend to be a client, and when they enter the apartment, they go into the apartment, they have seeking around the apartment, they are looking into the phones to see they use methods which is very strange that the police can use compared to what kind of crime they are kind of accused for doing, which is in breaking the whatever. So and then the police is put them in arrest, and then they are. What sex workers tell the police in or the dialogue between the police and the sex workers during this stress situation are then used by the police to argue for deportation or expelling. And sometimes it's a misunderstanding. Like people said that, I thought they asked if how long time I'm going to stay here in Norway, and not how long time I have been here in Norway. And then the police used this to say that the sex worker was lying about their staying in Norway. They said that they will only stay for a week and not for almost 3 months and so on. So it's really like they have their legal protection is very bad. And it's not only we and all the social providers working for sex workers who are kind of reacting. This is also lawyers saying that this is really, really bad. There is lawyers working going into these cases. Yeah, and I think you just have to ask me more if you want more.
Thank you. Yes, if you have questions, like put them in the chat or also under the YouTube live stream video, and then we will have some time towards the end to come back to that. But let's go to another country which has been going through some turbulent times, I think, in the past year. Together with Hungary, Poland is not really rocking democracy these days, let's put it mildly. So Anna from SexWorkPolska, can you update us on how you're managing this third wave of the pandemic? I know you have been emphasizing community solidarity, and every time I go up to your Facebook page, it's always like small packets that you're sending to sex workers. So how are you managing?
Hi, thank you, Bogi. Yeah, those packets are, thank you ICRSE for your grant, so we could give some nice presents to our community. And yeah, this third wave is really different than the first, because last year in March, I remember it was everyone was so stressed about the COVID situation. The lockdown was really heavy, like the streets were totally empty. And then we had this idea straight away to organize something for our community, because when the government introduced the crisis shield, the first one, so this package of protective laws for businesses and workers, it did not include sex workers, as you said, and it's first because the sex work in Poland is not recognized as work, and second because of the criminalization of third parties that we have. So all organized workplaces are criminalized, and sex workers' labor relations are not recognized as such. So none of the workers' benefits could be obtained by sex workers. So immediately when the places closed down, and last year most of the places closed down during lockdown, people just lost jobs, lost income, and they didn't have any any support from the government. So we then thought about creating this emergency fund. We also saw, because last year many people organized grassroots support from their communities, well, for neighbors and other people in need, people in quarantine and so on. But we saw that this support was very conditional. So people, the support depended on how a person's need was judged by potential benefactors, whether they were representing something people wanted to support, or many times people were just criticized for whom they are. For example, sex workers asking for help. And we thought, well, we need to do something on our own. So we started the emergency fund, which was like unconditional support for persons in need, when everyone every sex worker could apply for just ask for money, and we would grant persons with small amounts of 50 euro. So we managed to support up to today 225 people, which is very little but a lot, like my colleague Agata says. But it's mainly a message that there is a community who is caring about people, that we are there. And this was also like a message sent that we can support people not only with this small grant, but also we have also like legal support or psychological support that people can use. So we had this really intensive time last year when promoting the first emergency fund. We tried to reach media, even like middle class magazines. Like we had interview in Vogue, Polish edition, which was like quite nice, I have to say. And many people get to know about our community, our organization, and the fund. So we got messages from all over Poland. We saw people networking and spreading the news to their working friends that they can get support from the emergency fund. And yeah, that is what we always underline, that this is support from the community, that the fund is mostly funded by allies and by other sex workers who donated money and offered services in order to boost the donations to the emergency fund. That was sometimes very surprising for people, and they were like really touched that there is someone wanting to support them. And now in the third wave, which is the worst in Poland, by the way, like it is more people are ill, more people, there are more COVID cases than any time we had since last year. But people are very, very tired, and the lockdown is not so strict. People are trying to work, also the control on the COVID restrictions are not so heavy as last year, and people also like places are working underground, like illegally, not only sex work places, but also like restaurants, fitness clubs. So like everyone in Poland seems to get used to it, but also I think there are so many other things going on that people don't pay so much attention to the COVID crisis, but more look what is happening in their lives or in politics or like in general, which is not going very well, because the 2020 was the year when we had great attacks on LGBTQ plus community from the right-wing politicians, from Polish president. And then in October, in the middle of the second wave of pandemic, Polish government started to repress the women's rights, and it made the strict anti-abortion law even stricter, criminalizing almost all possibilities to get legal abortion in Poland. And this caused a great mass mobilization in Poland. Like hundreds, thousands of people came on the streets, which was like a time of great solidarity and great hopes. But well, it didn't change anything. Now there are another law is trying to be introduced, which criminalizes abortion, and also people who do their own abortion are to be criminalized. So people are really, really tired with all this stuff. And just to add to that, what is most frustrating for us, and what is happening since a couple of last weeks, we see growing strength of abolitionist groups. And what is new, that is like something new since December, that this is this anti-sex work sex workers I don't know voices get to politics and to the like mass media. It's not only being discussed in feminist groups, which was the case earlier, but now it got to the mainstream somehow. How did it happen? So that was a really strange story. There is one of the most active SWERF and TWERF radical feminist who became the assistant of one of the member of the parliament by the left party, and she So she was kind of acknowledged that way. And there was a whole outrage in the feminist and LGBTQ plus circles that she's being like accept that she got this position. And however, when she was fired after a few days of this shitstorm, she the party Razem, the left party, they apologized the trans community and they asked for anti-discriminatory workshop, but they totally were silenced about the sex workers community. Like we were made invisible once again. Yeah, so this is on the left, but then we see this coalition of strange bedfellows when this whole stuff was brought to the right-wing press and to the public television, which is controlled by our conservative government. And this woman was, she was portrayed as the victim of pimp lobby, which of course was pointed at us. And then there began a whole investigation on the on who is this pimp lobby, and the right-wing journalist went after our Facebook page, our web page, targeting sex workers and accusing us of being pimp lobby, advertising I don't know, prostitution, sex work, and also for being anti-police. It was because we criticized the police rights that are really increasing in number in last few weeks. So this is really a difficult time for us, when instead of working on the second edition of the emergency fund, which is really needed now, and instead of doing our artwork and advocacy work, we have to deal with this virtual attacks, quarrels, and we have to do like a lot of community care work because people are really feel threatened and feel that it's getting more and more dangerous to be a sex worker and also a sex workers activist in Poland.
Thank you, Anna. Not really good to see that politicians are coming after sex workers, not just in Poland, but in Scotland as well. Maybe not the right time to attack the sex worker community, if anyone has thought about that. There is also quite some transphobia piling up in Spain, and also sex worker phobia, as far as I have been following the news. So let's hear Sabrina about that and what you're doing in the third. You had one of the strictest lockdowns last year. So how is the situation now?
Thank you very much, Bogi, and thank you very much, ICRSE, for this space. It's correct. We had one of the strictest lockdowns in Europe. Now the situation, we still have restrictions. We still have curfews almost in all cities of Spain. And of course, this makes difficult mostly for the colleagues that are street-based. It's difficult for them to go out on the street. They can only do it around here in Barcelona, around 9 p.m., 7 p.m. Until 10 p.m., 11, where they can still be on the streets, but not more. So it's been difficult for them to make clients. Of course, the prices have going down because of the situation. The clients are not are not the best ones. The good ones are still worried because of COVID. We have a slow vaccination ratio here. So it's taking a lot of time, and we don't know where when we are going to get the vaccines. Um, the restrictions also include that that mostly the brothels or the brothels that have hotel license that they usually have, they cannot open. So the sex workers that are working for a third party in the brothels or in the clubes de carretera in Spain, the roads, they're not open. And well, all the work that you can have the brothel. Also, sometimes the brothel owners, they own flats in the cities. Usually, the brothels are outside the city, and the flats you work, or basically we work in flats. So they usually also own a flat or a small house, and they have been able to work there. And some other colleagues, they have gone to Romania, Bulgaria, and haven't been able to come back. And of course, the situation is still complicated for sex workers. Fortunately, we have been able to achieve some little things, such as, first of all, we were able, after the crowdfunding and that we had on 2020, and the good response we had for them. We continue to carry on another crowdfunding effort, but also the restrictions have been going down. So the emergency wasn't that the people didn't feel it was like super emergency, like everybody was like kind of normal again. So we in this case, in this campaign that we organized, the last one, we only were able to raise 3,500 euros in comparison of the 35,000 that we were able to get some months before. But that also reflects also the situation in Spain economically. It's very bad. So also the generosity of the people that had been working before, well, it also has a limit. And well, we decided to focus our efforts in supplying food, also hygiene products and cleaning products as much as we could. Fortunately, for those kind of items, people are still donating. But we are also going to finish this, because there are some restrictions that probably after Easter are going to be raised. So we were able to connect with CGT, the trade union CGT here in Spain. They supported us with their offices. So they have the different parts of the cities. So we can gather the food and the products there, and then we take it to our own place. That we didn't want to recollect all the material and everything in our place, because we're still we just got this place recently, and we don't want to other people and the TERFs and abolitionists, we don't want them to know where the place is, because we still are wanted to keep it as a safe place. Thanks to all this monthly food deliveries, food distribution. we have been able also to amplify our base of sex workers, mostly with sex workers where we weren't able to reach, that are the street-based sex workers, Latin American trans women, most of them. And we have also detected a couple of them that want to do things, they want to get involved, they want to help. So that's been very, very useful for our community building. And we're planning also in this process go with the capacity building and trying to also to have that to give that sector of sex work in the city like a push up, so they can be visible and they can also be active and doing activism. And that's the good, that's the good part. So that's the optimist side. The bad part, the pessimistic and realistic and terrible thing is that well, in Spain, we have the first coalition government in history. It's a progressive coalition, and of course, yeah, there has been internally they have this argument, this conflict for the equality ministry, because the Socialist Party in Spain, they think they own the feminist movement. And of course, that ministry has been like very, very disputed. They had to give it to the other party, to Unidas Podemos. So this has been in a very big dispute, and using the issues that are more divisive and within the feminist movement as a weapon. One is trans people. We are discussing after years of being requesting it to make another new law that improves the one that we still have in 2007 about trans identity laws. So for the moment, you have to go to a psychologist, you have to go to hormone therapy for 2 years before you can make your legal name and gender recognition. We want to change this. We want to follow the examples of Argentina, of Mexico City, of other places. I think Belgium as well, where you can you don't have to be to the doctors. You're not pathologized, and simply that's there has been also a pushback from the mainstream feminist movement. This has came this turf rhetorics, and also given that the sex workers and trans sex workers are visible in the sex worker movement and also the trans movement, there's also this conflation about the usual thing like the Soros, the lobby, the pharma, all this information ball that it's only noise that is distracting people from the real issues, that is distracting the politicians from the real lives of actual trans people. And that has been admitted today to the courts, to the Congress. Let's see. And the other bad news that is just about sex work. They're also planning the Spanish government. They're working on 2 legislations. One is an anti-trafficking legislation, and the other one it's within the law of the sexual freedom that it's increases the penalties for rapes and sexual abuse, and makes different changes to this felonies. The law wants to, because in their logic, sex work is a form of violence, blah blah blah. so they are complaining that, so they're putting in the articles of the of that law as well. So really the strategy is not that they're not finding the clients because they realized it's not possible as well, or is less let's say it's less spectacular for the titles, and they're going against the third parties, and it's because they're the more visible, you know, these big brothels at the border of France, you know, outside Madrid or Valencia, the big cities. They're very visible. So for this government that it's named, they name themselves as progressive and feminist. They really wanted to shut them down, and they say like, we ended prostitution. There are no brothels. So it's equality, the paradise of equality, and everybody's happy. So that's really the situation. It's not really nice, because when you see the Socialist Party being supported in their transphobia by the alt-right wing of Vox, with the Citizen Go bus supporting also TERF's rallies prior the 8th of March. So the situation is not nice. We are going to need a lot of support from Europe, because these laws are imminent, and of course, again, criminalize again our activity, and without addressing really the main issues, the root issues that makes us take the decision to do sex work in the first place. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sabrina. Some good news, even more bad news. So thank you for this update about going after the third parties. I haven't heard about that. Thank you so much. And we have the last speaker, Thor from UTSOPI Belgium. We have been speaking a bit more than we were supposed to. So if you have any questions here in the Zoom meeting or on the YouTube live, send it to me or to everyone right now, so that we can follow up. I want to ask after Thor's presentation. So Belgium is a case study in the publication, which was pretty progressive in comparison to others in how sex workers' voices were listened to, and how they were included in reopening and also in service provision. So let's hear about what you do focus now, Thor.
Yeah, thank you very much for organizing this webinar. So I'll explain first a little bit the fundings that we received and that enabled us to kind of doing something the emergency actions. So during the first wave, we received about 100,000 euros from the government. So the city of Schaerbeek, which is where our office is based and where the red light, part of the red light district in Brussels is based. And also a Belgian organization, which is the King Baudouin Foundation, which gave us 10,000 euros. We received exactly 25,000 euros for the reinforcement of the employee team. So now we are 7 instead of 4. So yeah, it's easier in that way. And also for having for receiving some COVID-19 health kits, and for thinking about potential deconfinement. During the first wave, we also launched a crowdfunding, which enabled us to collect 38,500 euros, which is huge. So this money could be used for direct aid towards sex workers to pay their rent, food, etc. And during the following waves, this same crowdfunding was less efficient because everyone was touched by the crisis, of course, and as it has been said before, it was a lot of allies or even sex workers themselves with more privileges that could give, but also clients sometimes. Yeah. So for the second wave, we obtained specific government funding to support sex workers during the COVID crisis. So we received 30,000 euros for food vouchers and health kits. Because in the food vouchers there is no, you can only buy food. So yeah. And we also received money from the federal government as part of the support for sex workers for the COVID-19 crisis, which was 233,000 euros, with 200,000 euros for UTSOPI Flanders, and 33,000 euros for UTSOPI Brussels, where I work now. So inside this money, there were 60% for direct aid to sex workers and 40% for operating costs. And it's always the small difficulty in receiving money from subsidies is that you cannot exactly control that money in a way, because you receive it. So if it said it's not for direct money, you for direct aid, you cannot really use it for that. So it was that's why it was very nice to keep the crowdfunding and to keep sharing it. So with those resources, as I said before, we could kind of help in different ways than it had been since the first wave, for instance. So basically, since very late 2020, we gave the food vouchers and health kits. But we also maintained direct financial aid according to the available sum of the pool. During the first wave, it was about 42 sex workers that have directly been supported financially with the financial aid, and 100 sex workers received the food packages. And it was interesting to see because we asked them if they have dependents or not, and we saw that among all the sex workers we gave food to, 77% of them had dependents, which is an interesting data that they are actually feeding a lot of people, and that the money they have from sex work is sometimes the only available source of money in a household. So yeah. In this period, the collective, in a way, became more important for sex workers as more sex workers joined the UTSOPI's private groups and our mailing lists during the first wave in order to stay in touch with the sex worker community. But also around like 100 people were psychologically supported by our emergency line, included sex workers who received financial assistance. And if we include psychological support during distributions and via self-help groups, the number of psychological supports provided is quite high, because we could actually share a lot of informal moments together, which was nice because, yeah, as it has been said earlier, the aspect of mental health and isolation, loss of job, and yeah, social isolation was quite and is still quite difficult, even though now the situation changed a bit here. And during the second wave, it was nice because we could give food vouchers instead of giving food packages, which took an extremely high amount of time and energy, but also is way better for them to just choose what they want to eat. So we gave about 130, we gave to about 130 sex workers, like different sex workers, for food vouchers and health kits. And 75 received direct financial aid. So yes, we were quite lucky to have all of this money and to be supported by the local policymakers. But still, the Brussels red light district is divided into 2 different townships which had different perspective. So sometimes it was a bit difficult to make it a bit fluent, also in terms of how much we're giving to whom regarding the townships where the person is living, because for each townships it was a different amount of money. So yeah, this was a difficulty, but with the time we could kind of systematize a bit better our system and to make it efficient, and also straighten the aid that the sex workers could receive. Like they could count on this money that would arrive every month, basically. So with this, we could focus on the more long-term projects, which is also often and always the difficulty in such period, that you kind of forget all about the long-term and so important projects that all our organizations are doing. So there's a research who has been conducted among different organizations working with sex workers in order to measure the impact of the COVID on sex workers and on sex work. So we sent out 90 questionnaires, which were paid for them in collaboration with other associations, and we're going to analyze those numbers. And so this survey had been asked by the French Community Commission and implies kind of their will to get informed about the realities of the ground, because they are part of our funders, and yeah, they want to know what is happening, basically. Another aspect was the strengthening of the bond between UTSOPI, our organization, and sex workers during this period. So because we try to keep going to the red light district for doing outreach sessions and distributing prevention stuff. So it was the occasion to meet regularly, seeing who was still working, if there is any issues in the district, and also to give a practical vision of the actions we were doing to sex work and trying to include them in our organization. So some of the workers working in the red light district, who are in the big majority undocumented migrant sex workers, mainly from Nigeria, became effective members of the association, and they also in a way had more time because no work. So to participate in some actions such as the distribution of health kits, for banners creation, in the perspective of a demonstration we did in March, but also press interviews for some money.
Oh,
So
I can ask you to wrap it up. We're gonna be running really late. Sorry about it.
Okay, how much time do I have still?
1-2 minutes, if that's
okay.
possible.
Okay. So basically, yes, I want to, maybe we can just focus on the aspect of the collaborations we had made, and still violence in the districts was quite, was increasing as everywhere. So we start, this a collaboration between UTSOPI and the police was already existing, but we did more meetings in order to set up some moments where sex workers could, in a safe space, press charges or complain about the situation that was happening. So we try to set this kind of space. The collaboration with Pagasa, which is an anti-trafficking NGO, also kept existing. We just kept going all our different projects. A collaboration with Maison du Monde also, which is because there is already a tool in France called Projet Jasmine, which is an interactive list for spotting aggression, harassment, and violent clients. And he's a tool for fighting against violence towards sex workers. So we try to investigate to adapt this tool in Belgium and see if it's possible. So yeah, basically we try to focus on the more long-term project, and it was not very possible at the beginning of the crisis, the first wave, but now we can manage working on both sides of all these actions, basically. Thank you.
It is an amazing amount of work that you did, like just listening to this, and so happy to hear. And you're also in the ICRSE report with this as a case study, like how you used the pandemic in a way to your advantage and to the advantage of the community. So congratulations on me if I haven't said it yet. Any questions to the speakers? I know we are running late. Sorry, by that troll, I was so disturbed that I forgot to keep the time. Anything? Yeah, happy Trans Visibility Day. That was going on in the chat. We haven't mentioned that. I didn't see any comments. Anyone, this is your time. We have not more than 3 more minutes. So if anything is burning, say it now or put it in the chat. If not, in the meantime, Astrid wanted to say a couple of sentences about something that she forgot. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I was just stressed about saying about the violence in the police, so I forgot to say. So I just want to inform you that the PION also has been. We were established like a crisis fund and got more than 100,000 kroner, which during the time the ban of selling sex was operating in March and April in 2020, and that we have used the section in the disease control, the Act of Disease Control, which is one section used to dealing with the prevention of diseases, which we have been used to put pressure on the government, and both on MPs and local politicians to opening for giving crisis help, financial help for sex worker. We have not been have success in this. It's very quiet. It's very shocking to see how the legal zero tolerance is also affecting the political approach to sex work in Norway. So anyone who are struggling with the idea that the Nordic model is really feministic and supporting for sex worker is not true. And I just want also to say that we are in the moment we have had support from the National Health Institutes, and at the moment we have created and the guidelines for sex workers for prevention for disease prevention for sex workers. Okay. And we also have some of the political parties has been in their. This is the year of election in Norway, so two of the political parties has raised the issue about regulation of sex work in Norway as a consequence of how this has been dealt with during the pandemic.
Thank you so much for adding that, and thank you so much for staying with us a bit longer than we planned. I will email the publication tomorrow, and also stay tuned because tomorrow we are going to launch a video with amazing sex worker activists across Europe who are sharing about the work they did. That will be also in the email from us. If no urgent questions, I didn't see anything in the chat, and I scanned it as much as I could at 7:30. Then congratulations to all the groups for keeping up the fight. It was really nice to check in. Since December we haven't been in touch that much, so it was a lot of information to process. And feel free to share the YouTube video, which we will also launch tomorrow, and also the publication. So let's raise our voices together, so we might be the next Belgium. Let's hope so. Belgium is setting the standard now. UTSOPI definitely, and also some state responses are positive. So it was good to hear about that. Thank you so much, and see you soon. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Bye everyone.
Bye bye.